Throughout the entirety of Kamaru Usman's career, I did not like him. I constantly cheered for his downfall. I didn't really like his mannerisms. I didn't like his fighting style here and there. That kind of changed over the course of time, but I've changed my mind. I think I was completely wrong about Kamaru Usman. I'm going to talk about that today. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name is Kyle. I am your guy with too many YouTube channels. Let's talk about Kamaru Usman. So, guys, like I just said, over the years that I've been watching Kamaru Usman, and honestly, the dislike for him really started with the whole 30% thing. And you know what's funny is, something that I want to speak about is part of the reasons why I changed my mind is because of the podcast, and especially the podcast with Dana White. It was really funny because during that podcast that Kamaru Usman had with Dana White did bring up that he didn't like that Usman, the whole 30% thing, which was awesome. So I thought, first of all, it was really, really cringe when he came into the UFC. He had this dominant win, but it wasn't that exciting. He comes in like, this is me at 30%. This is me at 30%. There was no charisma to it. There was just no fun to it. Not quite frankly, I just thought it was arrogant, to be honest with you. And it's different when guys come in and they have some sort of, like I just said, charisma to them. But Kamaru Usman didn't have that. So bursting onto the scene, Kamaru Usman kind of rubbed me the wrong way with that, to be honest with you. And the other thing that really bothered me about him, which he still does, but I'm starting to, I don't know why. It's just not really bugging me anymore. But I always kind of like got a little bit, I never got upset at him, don't get me wrong, but I always didn't really like the fact that he always tried to talk so cool, you know? If I'm talking about making a YouTube video, this is like how Kamaru Usman would do it, like, hello everybody and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I am your guy with too many YouTube channels. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know if, it's really, really weird to touch on that because he still does do that, but I always okay, Kamaru Usman, I get it. You want to sound pretty sick, okay? That was pretty much the entirety of not really liking Kamaru Usman. Plus, I didn't like that in his fights, or at least in the early bit of his career, he wasn't that exciting. He held people up against the fence. He did some toe stomps, and he had these dominant yet lackluster performances and would just talk about how great he is and how dominant he was. And I was just like, I overly just thought he was unlikable. That plus this isn't fair of me, but at the same time, I can't help it. I do think that he was on performance enhancing drugs, but he's also never been caught. So is that even fair of me to judge? I don't really know. I believe we've seen the evidence, right? It's more likely that he's on something, and I also didn't really like that. So throughout the entirety of his career, I didn't care who faced Kamaru Usman. I was cheering against him, even against Masvidal. And I do not like Masvidal. I was like, okay, Masvidal, let's have a new champion over here. The entire time he was in his career, I really, really disliked him, okay? Now at the end of his career, now after Leon Edwards became the champion, I was kind of part of that camp, but I don't get me wrong, I always respected how active he was as champion. He was always taking fights. He was always taking on very tough fights. He never just stopped and wanted to be double champion. He lapped his division depending on how the way you want to look at that. He was a great champion. And his fights only started getting more and more exciting, to be honest with you. So I kind of started warming up to him there, but then we all really, really missed the Usman era. And since Leon Edwards is champion, and since all of these champions are coming up and not fighting, because Kamaru Usman was fighting absolutely all the time, right? Regardless, it's been a little bit, but you get my point. I didn't like Kamaru Usman throughout the majority of his career. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Kamaru Usman is nearly my favorite fighter or anything, but my tune on him 110% completely changed when I gave his podcast a chance. If you guys don't know, the podcast is still starting to gain some steam right now. He started a podcast with Henry Cejudo. They had a couple guests on. They've been doing some segments by themselves, and I am probably going to religiously listen to this. Kamaru Usman has shown how well-spoken he is, how intelligent he is in the game. He seems like a caring guy when it comes to the sport. Him and Henry Cejudo really bounce off of each other. Kamaru Usman, even if you take a look at any of the comments throughout their videos, most of them are about how great Kamaru Usman is as a host, and I'm a big Henry Cejudo fan. I think Henry Cejudo is great too, but even I have to admit, Kamaru Usman is really, really good behind the mic. We've seen him do some analyst desk over at ESPN before, and it was okay, but him being in this natural scene, like behind the scenes, just coming in, talking about fights, just talking with Dana White, talking about UFC with Chael Sonnen, like, he has a good relationship, and he bounces back with these people, and he actually creates for genuine, funny, interesting content. Kamaru Usman's very well spoken. It's just a side that I personally have not seen with Kamaru Usman, because again, I didn't really care for Kamaru Usman. I didn't follow his career. I didn't go look at Kamaru Usman interviews all that often. And when I did, he was still just talking about being a dominant champion. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I just had no interest. I didn't really like him that much. And don't get me wrong, I never hated Kamaru Usman. Never thought he was a bad person, okay? I wasn't a fan of Kamaru Usman. I just want to make that clear. But I love this podcast. I'm seeing a completely 100% different side of Kamaru Usman. Again, a caring guy, a funny guy, a guy who's comfortable behind the mic, a guy who's so humble, which is different too, because he was opening up about his losses. And honestly, something that really brought it out of him was Chael, if you guys want to watch that podcast. And I love the fact, even with Dana White when they had him on, Kamaru Usman was honest about, and here's another thing too. Perhaps there was a little bit of a shift in his attitude, because I was thinking about this to myself while I was listening to their podcast, because I've listened to many episodes at this point. I was trying to figure out whether or not Kamaru was always like this. I'm leaning towards no, and what really, really sold it for me was this morning at the time recording this video. You're probably seeing it a couple days later or a day later. I listened to the Dana White interview, or the Dana White podcast, as soon as that came out pretty much. And they had a whole part in it where Kamaru Usman was talking about how he had a whole different attitude when he first burst in the UFC, because he's like, oh, nobody wants to see me win. Dana White hates me. And this is where I was talking about the 30% thing, right? Dana White was laughing about the 30% thing with Kamaru Usman, and Kamaru had a good sense of humor about it. That's like, it's really, really cool, because he was talking like, oh, everybody wants to see me fall, and nobody wants to see me be champion. Of course, I'm hugely paraphrasing over here, but I'm saying that he had a different attitude coming to the UFC, and he did say that in his time with Dana White, and I suggest you guys go listen to it. And Kamaru was talking about how much he's matured over the years, and I kind of see it, dude. I kind of see it, and I really, really like Kamaru Usman right now. This is where I would really like to ask you guys to comment down below, because was he always like this? Was there something that I just wasn't seeing, or did Kamaru Usman actually have a little bit of a shift in mental attitude? A couple things that he has said in one of the recent podcasts make me believe that he has matured over the years, because again, another thing that I had a hugely respect for him was him talking about teaching his daughter a lesson, talking about how he was broken down. I made a whole video talking about that, actually, not this specifically, but the fact that fighters bring their kids to MMA, and I hate when people do that. And Kamaru, in so many words, he said that he was heartbroken to see his daughter have to see him get knocked out the way he did, but he used it as a tool to show her that he can get back up. He was talking about being a proud father, a proud athlete. He wants to make money for his family. I've seen him talk about so many different things when it comes to his own career, and a lot of his goals were respectable. His takes are respectable. He cares about his guests. He's very pleasant. He cares about his co-hosts. He cares about the people that he has the podcast on. I've just seen a completely different side of Kamaru Usman in this show that I'm watching, and I think, did I even mention the name of it? It's Pound for Pound with Kamaru and Henry Cejudo. I don't know if I actually mentioned that, but the podcast is getting steam. It's still in its infancy a little bit, but man, if they continue what they're doing, it's going to be absolutely fantastic. So again, what I was trying to say is, was Kamaru Usman always like this? I want to know. If you guys comment down below, that would be really, really helpful, because I spent the majority of my time watching him, disliking him, and I've done completely, honestly, kind of a 180 ever since I started listening to this podcast. It's just another very pleasant side of him that I've seen. So guys, please let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching the video on the screen right now. If you'd like to continue watching the channel, check out this video on screen right here. I will see you either there or in the next video, guys. Take care.